Is this live? Oh.
Yeah, it's live.
Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're here on Yahweh Sabbath today. Greetings to those on the internet. We hope you enjoy the messages that go out. I'm really excited about this message today. Just spent a lot of time chewing on that with a couple other brothers on the farm, which, by the way, being on the farm around other believers is just amazing. Felix has been a tremendous blessing on the farm, and it just feels right. It just feels right to have a community of believers who want to study the Bible, and we want to work together, and we have a fellowship meal on the weekends. We've been taking turns on who does the meal, but you haven't seen some work get done until you see 5 grown men putting their heads together, especially like bringing firewood out of the woods, an assembly line, throwing firewood, hay. I mean, just it's really moving. It's really moving. And I'm really excited about this year of where Yahweh's going to take the farm. But anyway, we were chewing on this. And the title of this message is The Sacrifice of Obedience. The sacrifice of obedience. Let me tell you what actually started this off. One of the brothers came to me and he went to Jeremiah chapter 7. I'm going to start there. In Jeremiah chapter 7, and he read I'm going to start in verse 21, Jeremiah 7:21. So this guy on the farm comes up to me and says, "Man, you need to check out this verse. This doesn't make sense. I can't put it together." I said, "Okay, well, let's check it out." So we go to Jeremiah 7:21. It says, "Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, put your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices and eat flesh. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this thing commanded I them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your Elohim, and you shall be my people, and walk in all the ways that I commanded you, that it may be well with you." And this guy was like, "This doesn't make sense. Sacrifice is part of the commandments. And here he's saying I didn't talk about commandments. This is a contradiction. I don't get it." And I said, "Well, that is kind of weird because there was sacrifices long before that in antiquity." I said, "Well, let me just chew on it for a little while and I'll get back to you." So I went back and I was reading. Well, the first verse that I looked up was this. This sounded so familiar. In verse 23 it says, "But this thing commanded I them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your Elohim, and you shall be my people, and walk ye in all the ways that I have commanded you, that it may be well with you." I was like, why does that sound familiar? Right when they came out of Egypt, before they even got the tablets or the commandments, he said, "Obey my word, I'll be your Elohim, you'll be my people." That's what he said. And they said, "All that he has said we will do." They agreed to obey him before they even knew what was expected of them. Okay? So I went back, just after I read this, I went back to this brother and I said, what it seems to me is right when they come out, he said, "Obey my voice, I'll be your Elohim, who be my people." That was the agreement. That is what we call the covenant. That is an agreement that they entered into with Yahweh before they even saw it on stone or in book form. They entered into a covenant before they had the rest of the word. Okay, so in the day that they came out, all he did ask them was to obey my voice, and the sacrifice did come later. It did come later. And after I did some meditating on this, it made this verse make sense. Galatians chapter 3. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 19 says, "Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgression, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made, and it was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. Well, Romans 4:15 says, if there is no law, there is no transgression. This says that the law was added because of transgression. So what that shows us is Yahweh had some instructions. They didn't obey the instructions, so the law of sacrifice was added because they didn't obey. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. Let's look at a couple of verses that kind of tie in with this. Now, in 7:22 of Jeremiah, let me go back there real quick. Jeremiah 7 and verse 22, it says, for I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt. So that day, he didn't speak to them concerning sacrifices and burnt offerings. What he did say that day in verse 23 is obey my voice. Obey my voice. Okay, and of course, on a bigger scheme of things, the way to get out of Egypt successfully was to obey his voice. And his voice said, put that blood on the doorpost if you want to come out. That's how you obey my voice and come out, and you'll be protected from what's about to happen. So they come out of Egypt, and he institutes the Sabbath. He tests them with manna. How was the Sabbath given? By his voice. How was the Passover given the day that they were delivered? By his voice. There was nothing written or etched in stone from them. The day that they come out of Egypt, he said, you're going to take this Passover lamb, you're going to slay it, you're going to put the blood on the doorpost, and you're going to do this forever as a memorial of this day. And again, it was by his voice. Now let's look at Proverbs chapter 21. Proverbs 21. And verse 3. Proverbs 21 verse 3. To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to Yahweh than sacrifice. He wants us to live justly, and he wants us to live with his righteous judgment, and that is far more acceptable to him than sacrifice. Let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 15. 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 22. 1 Samuel chapter 15 verse 22. And Samuel said, hath Yahweh as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of Yahweh? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. And let me tell you the background to this testimony here, ladies and gentlemen. The gentleman that came to me with this verse didn't come on his own accord. He came because somebody else presented that verse to him. And that person that came to him with that verse says, sacrifice just doesn't line up with Yahweh's character. It just doesn't make sense to me, because, in the Gospels it says that an evil father knows how to give good gifts to his children. How much more our Heavenly Father does he know how to give good gifts? And just killing these innocent animals and the spilling of blood, it just doesn't make sense to me. So that was his address to that verse to this gentleman. All right? So this gentleman brings the verse to me. So the first gentleman last night says, has Yahweh put anything on your heart that you're going to speak about tomorrow? And I said, as a matter of fact, he has. Jeremiah chapter 7 verse 22 that this guy brought to me, and I didn't realize that he was the originator of the idea, right? So we sat down and we chewed on this all night, not all night, but for several hours last night, woke up and chewed on it some more this morning. And he's absolutely right. Sacrifice is not in Yahweh's character. He wants us to obey. But he allowed the sacrifice because man didn't want to obey. Man didn't want to obey. So That's why the sacrifice was allowed. Now this brings us to a bigger picture. In the beginning was the Word. That's all that man needed, was the Word. That's it. But man broke the Word. So the Word became flesh. And the Word that became flesh took our broken word. He took the broken word, took it upon himself, and he allowed his flesh to be broken on the stake. No, it's not in his nature to kill, but it's in his nature to have mercy and to allow something to die because they didn't want to obey. So, when they came out of Egypt, what is the only thing they needed? To obey the word. And they didn't obey the word. So let's pick back up with that. Let's go to Exodus chapter 19. Now, previously to this, he tested them with the Sabbath. They rejected it. They didn't obey it. He gave them the Passover. And in Exodus 16:28, after they were breaking it, he said, "How long would you refuse to obey my commandments? How long?" And then we pick up in Exodus chapter 19 and verse 1. This is after the departure from Egypt. "And in the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount." This is 90 days after the departure, the 3rd month. And in verse 3, "And Moses went up unto Elohim, and Yahweh called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, You have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak to the children of Israel. And Moses came and called for the elders of the people, and laid before their faces these words." What words? "If you obey me, I will be your Elohim, and you'll be special." And all the people answered together and said, "All that Yahweh hath spoken we will do." And Moses returned the words of the people to Yahweh, like he didn't already know. And Yahweh said unto Moses, "Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever." And Moses told the words of the people unto Yahweh. And Yahweh said unto Moses, "Go unto the people, and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the 3rd day. For the 3rd day Yahweh will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai, and thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves that you go not up unto the mount." Let me skip down to one second here. Let's go to chapter 20. Just for the sake of time, Moses, they get ready to hear the 10 Commandments. The only words that were spoken audibly for all of them to hear. And he speaks to them the 10 Commandments. Let's pick it up in chapter 20, verse 18. "And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood far off. And they said unto Moses, Speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die." We don't want to hear that. "And Moses said unto the people, Fear not, for Elohim is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not. And the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near unto thick darkness where Elohim was. So he So Moses goes off to Yahweh by himself to hear from Yahweh. And watch what Yahweh tells him right here. In verse 22. And Yahweh said unto Moses, Thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, You have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make with me mighty ones of silver, neither shall you make unto you mighty ones of gold. The very first commandment given after the 10 commandments were given that they didn't want to hear. The very next verse, the very next commandment was, don't make mighty ones of gold. And while Moses was going up to the mountain to receive the commandments, what is the first thing they did? Aaron, we need some Elohims of gold. Aaron, we need a mighty one. We don't know what happened to this guy Moses. And Aaron says, well, give me all your gold. We're going to fashion a calf, a mighty one of gold. And when Moses come back, he said, what are you doing? He said, well, I threw this gold in the fire and out came this calf. Just walked out of there. So, and the very next verse, after he tells them this is what you don't need to do, he says, An altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen in all the places where I record my name. I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. And I just thought that was amazing. The first place where he actually said that there would be sacrifices was right after the very first sin from Moses coming down the mountain. And a bigger picture going on here with Moses going up the mountain. He goes up there. He receives the audible word put in stone. And then he also receives all of the other commandments of how to keep those 10 commandments. And Moses comes down with the 2 tablets of stone. And they're doing the very first thing Yahweh said don't do. And he takes the stones and he breaks them. And that was a symbol of man breaking the first agreement. All the words that he says we will do, and the very first word is what we didn't do. So then Moses has to go back up, and Yahweh says, well, this time you cut out your own stones and you bring the stones to me, and I'll write the same exact instructions on those stones. And that is our relationship with the new covenant. We bring our stony heart to Yahweh. We present it to him, and he writes the same exact instructions that they couldn't keep on our hearts. The same exact instructions he writes on our hearts. And so man broke the word, and the word became flesh to forgive us of our transgressions, our breaking the word. And this is something where I kind of want to tie this in. You know, Colossians chapter 2, it says, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us. He took them out of the way, nailing them to his stake. Everybody wants to nail something up there. We got people want to nail the Mosaic law up there. We got people want to nail the feast days and the circumcision up there. We got people wanting to nail rabbinical traditions up there. But the verse right before it says he has forgiven us our trespasses. I believe Frank read that one. And it is the broken word that was taken to the stake. That's what was against us. The Torah is never against you until you break it. So once we broke it, he took that up there, and he also took the part of us that wants to break it. Frank touched on that. The old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed. The person inside of us that wanted to break the word is taken to the stake with him, so that we can be raised in newness of life, so that we won't want to break the word no more. And it says in, I'm just going to quote him, I'm not going to go there, but in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, it says, he who knew no sin became sin for us. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 13 says, he became a curse for us. So I believe that's what was nailed to the stake. Our transgressions and the curse for our transgressions was taken to the stake. So is sacrifice, death, and the spilling of innocent blood in Yahweh's nature? Absolutely not. But he permitted it out of mercy. Hallelujah.